The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the weathered timbers of the ranch house. Outside, snow fell in gentle whispers against the window panes, a soft December evening in 1898. Cole Brennan sat in his chair, the leather worn smooth by years of use, his calloused hands wrapped around a glass of whiskey that caught the firelight like liquid amber. At 47, the lines around his eyes spoke of hard winters and harder choices, but tonight those eyes held something softer as they rested on the scene before him. Between them, on the braided rug before the fire, their older son Samuel held his own child. At 25, Sam had grown into a man of quiet strength like his father, and Cole saw in his son's face the same fierce protectiveness as he gazed at his 18-month-old son sleeping in his arms. The boy had married young just like his grandfather before him and built a good life with his wife on the eastern edge of the ranch, Elizabeth Brennan. Beth, to those who loved her, sat in the rocking chair near the hearth, her silvering hair catching the firelight. 15 years of Colorado sun and ranch life had transformed the pale Boston seamstress into a woman of quiet command. Beside her, their son James, now 14, sat reading a book, occasionally glancing up at his older brother with a mixture of admiration and amusement. "Pa," Sam said, his voice quiet in the peaceful room. "Tell the story again, about the night you found Ma in the snow." Cole glanced at Beth, who nodded with that knowing smile she wore whenever this request came. She had heard the tale 100 times, lived it once, but never tired of hearing how it sounded through Cole's measured words. "You never get tired of that story, do you, son?" "Never," Sam said firmly. "And I want him to hear it too." He looked down at his sleeping infant. "I want him to know how this family started, how we became who we are." Cole took a slow sip of whiskey, feeling the burn slide down his throat. He set the glass aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. The firelight played across his face as he began, his voice dropping into that storytelling cadence that could hold a room spellbound. "It was December of 1883, he said. "I was standing right where you are now, looking out that same window into a blizzard 10 times worse than what's falling tonight. 3 weeks had passed since the stagecoach was supposed to bring your ma to Salida, and every day I'd ridden to town, stood at that station platform, and watched the coaches come in empty." The scene shifted in his mind, time folding backward like a letter being unfolded, and Cole was there again. December 15th, 1883. The Colorado winter had settled over the Brennan Ranch like a shroud, transforming the 160 acres into an endless expanse of white. The Homestead Act of 1862 had given Cole this land, and 5 years of backbreaking work had proven it up, made it his in law and in blood. The cabin stood solid against the wind built from ponderosa pine. He had felled himself chinked with mud and moss to keep out the killing cold. Inside, the silence pressed heavy. Cole stood at the window, his breath fogging the glass as he stared into the storm. In his hand, worn soft from constant handling, was a letter. The paper bore the creases of 100 readings, the ink slightly smudged where his thumb always rested. He knew every word by heart, could recite them in his sleep, but still he read them again. "My dearest Mr. Brennan," it began in that careful, educated script that had first caught his attention. "I write to confirm my departure from Boston on the 28th of November. If the trains hold to schedule, I shall arrive in Denver on the 10th of December, and thence by overland stage to Salida, reaching you on the 15th. I confess my heart beats with both anticipation and trepidation. We have shared our thoughts through 47 letters over these 6 months, yet we remain strangers in flesh, if not in spirit. I pray I shall not disappoint you, and that the life we have discussed in our correspondence might prove as rich in reality as it has in imagination. I remain, with sincere regards and hopeful affection, Elizabeth Harper." December 15th had come and gone. Now it was the 5th of January, and the silence from the east was deafening. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. Cole turned to find his son standing in the doorway, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. Samuel was 10 years old, small for his age, but wiry with his mother's dark hair and Cole's serious gray eyes. The boy had been 5 when fever took his mother, and in the 5 years since, it had been just the two of them against the world. "You're looking at the letter again, Pa," Sam said. It wasn't a question. Cole folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket over his heart. "Just checking something. She's not coming, is she?" The words hit harder than any winter wind. Cole crossed the room and knelt before his son, putting them at eye level. "I don't know, Sam. The stage driver said there was trouble on the eastern route. Snow ice accidents. But that was 3 weeks ago. We should have heard something by now." "Maybe she changed her mind," Sam said, and there was something in his voice, relief maybe, or hope. "Maybe she decided she didn't want a ready-made family after all." Cole studied his son's face, reading the confusion there. For 6 months, Sam had watched his father write letters. By lamplight, had listened to Cole read, selected passages from Beth's responses, had slowly come to accept that change was coming. But acceptance wasn't the same as eagerness, and Cole knew his boy was still protecting his mother's memory, still afraid that loving someone new meant forgetting someone lost. "Listen to me," Cole said, his hands on Sam's thin shoulders. "I've read 47 letters from Elizabeth Harper. I know her heart, son. I know her courage. She's not the kind of woman who makes a promise lightly, and she's not the kind who breaks one easily. If she's not here, it's because something stopped her. And that means she might be in trouble." Sam's eyes widened. "You're going to look for her." "I am. But Pa, the storm, it's too dangerous." Cole pulled his son into a fierce hug, feeling the boy's heart beating against his chest like a trapped bird. "Sometimes a man has to do the dangerous thing because it's the right thing. Your ma, your birth mother, she taught me that. She was the bravest person I ever knew, fighting that fever for 3 days when the doctor said she'd be gone in 1. She didn't give up, and she wouldn't want me to give up now." When he released Sam, the boy's eyes were wet, but his jaw was set with determination. "Then you better find her, Pa. We need her." Those 3 words, "we need her," settled something in Cole's chest. His son was ready. They both were. An hour later, Cole stood in the main room of Dorothy Hayes's boarding house, his hat in his hands and his warmest coat already buttoned against the cold outside. Dorothy, a handsome woman in her early 50s with steel-gray hair and no-nonsense eyes, stood with her arms crossed, shaking her head slowly. "You're out of your mind, Cole Brennan," she said flatly. "Monarch Pass is blocked. The temperature is 20 below. You've never even met this woman." "I've met her heart through her words," Cole replied. "That's enough." "Is it enough to die for?" "Yes." The simple certainty in his voice made Dorothy's expression soften. She had known Cole since he first arrived in Salida, had watched him court and marry. Margaret had held him when fever took her, had helped him raise Sam through the dark years after. She knew this man knew his silences and his sorrows, and she knew that behind his quiet exterior burned a will of iron. "Fine," she said with a sigh. "But I'm keeping Sam here, and if you're not back in 3 days, I'm sending Sheriff Porter after you." Sam appeared from behind her skirts, his small bag already packed. He ran to his father and wrapped his arms around Cole's waist. "Find her, Pa," he whispered. "I'll be good for Mrs. Hayes. I promise." Cole knelt again, this last embrace lingering. "I know you will, son. You're the best thing I ever did." He stood and looked at Dorothy. "Take care of him." "Like he was my own," she promised. Cole turned toward the door, then paused. Through the window he could see a rider approaching through the snow, and even at a distance he recognized the fine Tennessee walker and the expensive coat. His jaw tightened. Warren Blackwood dismounted with the ease of a man who had never known hard labor, tying his horse to the rail with gloved hands that had never gripped a plow or mended a fence. At 45 he carried himself like minor royalty, which in Salida he nearly was. The Blackwood Ranch, sprawled across 500 acres north of town, worked by a dozen hired hands, while Warren himself spent his time in town, playing cards, influencing judges, and quietly acquiring the lands of less fortunate neighbors. 2 men flanked him as he climbed the steps to the boarding house, both rough types with the look of men hired more for muscle than skill. Warren's smile was broad and false as he entered, bringing a gust of cold air with him. "Cole Brennan," he said warmly, as if they were old friends rather than longtime adversaries. "Heard about your mail-order bride going missing? Terrible thing. Just terrible." Cole said nothing, his gray eyes flat and cold. Warren continued undeterred by the silence. "Of course, I also heard you're planning to ride out looking for her. Noble gesture. Foolish but noble." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "Thing is, that raises some questions about your ranch, doesn't it?" "What kind of questions?" Dorothy asked sharply. Warren turned his smile on her, all teeth and no warmth. "Well, Mrs. Hayes, under the Homestead Act, if a man abandons his claim for more than 6 months, that claim can be contested. Now, I'm not saying Cole here is abandoning anything, but riding off into a blizzard for a woman who might already be dead, leaving his land unworked, his cattle untended, well, a man could see how that might look like abandonment." Cole's hands curled into fists at his sides. "I'm coming back in 3 days. If you survive," Warren said pleasantly. "But if you don't, well, someone needs to look after that land. That creek of yours, Cottonwood Creek, it's got the best water rights in the county. Be a shame if all that went to waste because you died chasing a ghost." The threat hung in the air like gun smoke. Cole took a step forward, and Warren's men moved, hands drifting toward their coat pockets. Dorothy quickly put herself between them, one hand on Cole's chest. "That's enough," she said firmly. "Warren, you've said your piece. Cole, you need to get going if you're going." Warren tipped his hat, still smiling. "Just being neighborly, Mrs. Hayes. Cole, I hope you find what you're looking for out there. But if you don't come back, well, don't worry about young Sam. I'm sure the town will see he's looked after." He glanced at the boy, who glared back with 10-year-old fury. "Good kid. Be a shame if he ended up in an orphanage." Cole moved so fast that even Warren's hired men were caught off guard. One moment he was standing still, the next his hand was fisted in Warren's expensive coat, pulling the larger man close enough that their faces were inches apart. "You touch my son," Cole said, his voice barely above a whisper but hard as granite. "You threaten my land one more time, and I don't care what kind of connections you have. I will end you. Do you understand me?" For just a moment, real fear flickered in Warren's eyes. Then Cole released him, stepping back with the same controlled precision. Warren smoothed his coat, his smile returning, but shakier now. "No need for threats, Brennan. I'm just looking out for the community." He turned and left his men following, but at the door he paused. 3 days, Cole. If you're not back in 3 days, well, we'll see what the law has to say about abandoned property." When the door closed behind them, Sam ran to his father. "Pa, what did he mean? Can he really take our ranch?" Cole knelt and took his son's face in his hands. "Listen to me. That man is a snake, and snakes strike when they think you're weak. But we're not weak, are we?" "No, sir." "That's right. And when I get back, we're going to deal with Warren Blackwood the right way, legal and proper. But first, I have to find Elizabeth, because a man who doesn't keep his word isn't worth the ground he stands on." 30 minutes later, Cole sat astride Thunder, his 7-year-old quarter-horse gelding, at the edge of town. Thomas Sullivan, his ranch foreman, and the closest thing he had to a friend, stood holding the reins of a pack-horse loaded with supplies. "You sure about this, boss?" Thomas asked. At 38, the Irishman had worked the Brennan Ranch for 3 years, and in that time had proven himself steady and true. "I'm sure. Blackwood's not bluffing about the legal trouble. He's been building a case for months. While you were writing love letters, he was filing claims with the Territorial Land Office." Cole's jaw tightened. "What kind of claims?" Thomas pulled a folded document from his coat. "This came yesterday. I didn't want to tell you with everything else going on, but you should know. Blackwood's lawyer filed a formal challenge to your water rights. Says his grandfather had prior appropriation to Cottonwood Creek dating back to 1859. Claims your deed from 1873 is subordinate." "That's impossible. I have clear title from the Denver Land Office." "I know, but he's produced a surveyor's map from 1859 showing an irrigation ditch from the creek to what's now Blackwood land. If he can prove his grandfather used that water first under Colorado's prior appropriation doctrine, he might have a case. Cole felt the world narrowing around him, the walls closing in. His ranch, his home, the only inheritance he had for Sam, all of it balanced on legal technicalities and the word of a man who had been dead for 20 years. When's the hearing? Week from Monday, Judge Morrison presiding. Morrison is Blackwood's cousin. I know. Cole sat silent for a long moment, the snow falling around them, thunder shifting beneath him, restless to move. Everything in him screamed to stay to fight this battle first, to protect what was his. But another voice, quieter, but no less insistent, reminded him of those 47 letters of the woman who had risked everything on the promise of a life with him, of the commitment he had made. "Thomas," he said finally, "I need you to do something for me." "Anything, boss." "Go to Henry Clark. Tell him what's happening. Ask him to file a counterclaim on my behalf. Cite the Homestead Act, my 5 years of continuous improvement, my proven rights. Get it on record that I'm not abandoning anything. I'm exercising my right to leave my property in the care of my appointed agent, which is you." Thomas nodded slowly. "That might work, but Morrison will still likely rule against you if you're not there to defend yourself." "Then I better be back in time." Cole gathered the reins, his decision made. "I gave Elizabeth Harper my word. Before I was worried about water rights, or Warren Blackwood, or anything else, I promised her I'd be waiting when she arrived. She kept her half of that promise. She got on that stage, and if she's out there alive waiting for someone to come, I'm going to be that someone." Thomas stepped back, respect clear in his eyes. "You're either the bravest man I know, or the most foolish. Maybe both." Cole touched his heels to Thunder's flanks. "Take care of things, Thomas, and if Blackwood tries anything, you have my permission to shoot him." The Irishman grinned. "Been waiting years to hear you say that, boss." Cole rode east into the teeth of the storm. The world became a study in white and gray, the boundaries between earth and sky erased by the endless snow. Cole kept Thunder to a steady walk, conserving the horse's strength following the Arkansas River Valley, where he knew the stage road ran. The cold was a physical presence, seeping through his wool coat and leather gloves, turning his breath to ice crystals in his beard. He had packed with the methodical care of a man who understood that survival in the wilderness came down to preparation and will. In his saddlebags, 50 rounds of ammunition for his Winchester Model 1873 rifle, a Colt single-action Army revolver, as backup, 2 wool blankets from the Hudson Bay Company, matches in a waterproof tin jerky and hardtack coffee rope, a hunting knife, and extra socks and gloves. Thunder's hooves had been shod with winter shoes caulked for ice, and Cole had fed the gelding extra oats before leaving to build up reserves of energy. The first day passed in a blur of white. Cole walked beside Thunder when the snow grew too deep, breaking trail to spare the horse his legs burning with the effort. He read the landscape through memory and instinct, using the way the wind shaped the drifts and the density of pine stands to navigate when all visible landmarks disappeared. That night he found shelter in a small cave barely large enough for man and horse, but it cut the wind and held the heat from his fire. He built the fire with practiced efficiency, using inner bark from a dead pine for tender dry twigs, for kindling larger branches laid in a careful pattern that would burn slow and hot. He melted snow for water, fed Thunder from the oat bag, and checked his weapons to ensure the cold hadn't frozen the mechanisms. Sitting in that cave, the firelight casting his shadow huge against the stone walls, Cole pulled out Beth's letters. He had brought all 47 of them wrapped in oilcloth to keep them dry, and he read them now by the dancing light, hearing her voice in the carefully formed words. She wrote about her father, a watchmaker in Boston, a precise and gentle man who had taught her to see the beauty in small mechanisms, the way tiny gears working in harmony could measure the infinite. She wrote about her mother, a schoolteacher who had filled their small apartment with books and poetry, who had died reciting Wordsworth. She wrote about the influenza that took them both within 2 weeks of each other last spring, about the emptiness of coming home to rooms that would never again echo with their voices. "I find myself," she had written in her 23rd letter, "making tea for one and setting 2 additional cups from habit. I leave them there sometimes, those empty cups, as if their presence might summon back what I have lost. But ghosts do not drink tea, mister. Brennan and the living must eventually clear the table and move forward. Your letters have given me a destination for that forward movement. For that I am grateful beyond words." Cole understood that kind of loss. He had lived it, breathed it for 5 years since Margaret died. He knew about the empty cups, the habits that persisted beyond their purpose, the way grief could become a comfortable companion that you feared to release because at least it was something, a connection to what had been. That was why he had to find Beth, not just because he had promised, though that would have been enough, but because they had both survived the unsurvivable, and maybe together they could build something that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it. Morning came gray and cold. The snow had stopped, and the sky showed patches of pale blue between the clouds. Cole extinguished his fire, scattered the ashes, and led Thunder back onto the stage road. By midday, he spotted it. The stagecoach sat tilted at a sharp angle where the road curved along a steep embankment. The Concord coach, built by Abbott and Downing Company and worth more than Cole earned in 2 years, was a wreck. The left rear wheel had shattered the axle, snapped clean through. The coach had slid sideways, momentum carrying it off the road and into a shallow ravine where it now rested against a boulder, its elegant lines marred by splintered wood and torn leather. Cole's heart hammered as he urged Thunder down the slope. He dismounted 20 feet from the coach and approached on foot, his hand on his pistol, though he didn't know what threat he expected. "Hello," he called, his voice swallowed by the vastness. "Anyone there?" The coach door hung open. Snow drifted inside through a broken window. Cole climbed up his boots, finding purchase on the tilted frame, and looked inside. Empty. But there were signs of life, or recent life. Luggage was scattered across the interior, carpet bags and trunks, their contents spilling out. Cole saw a woman's dress, expensive fabric now ruined by exposure. A man's leather case filled with papers. A Bible with a cracked spine. And there, wedged between the seats, a smaller bag made of carpet bag material with brass fittings. He pulled it free and turned it over. Embossed on the leather handle plate in neat script, E.H. Elizabeth Harper. Cole's hands shook as he opened it. Inside, carefully folded and wrapped in silk, were his letters. All 47 of them arranged in chronological order, the most recent on top. She had carried his words with her, kept them safe through the crash and the chaos after. He lifted them out with the same reverence he might have shown a Bible, and beneath them found other treasures. A professional sewing kit, the needles organized by size, the thread in perfect rainbow gradation. A daguerreotype photograph in a leather frame showing an older couple, the man with kind eyes and careful hands, the woman with Beth's same determined chin. Her parents he knew. The only family she had left in the world, now carried as precious cargo to a new life. And at the bottom of the bag, wrapped in a handkerchief, $47 in bills and coins. Her life savings, everything she had scraped together from her seamstress work, intended to help them start their life together. She had left none of it behind, which meant she had left this bag in the coach planning to return for it, or been unable to carry it. Cole climbed out of the coach and began to study the ground. The snow had filled most tracks, but not all. He could make out where people had gathered at the rear of the coach at least 6 sets of footprints of varying sizes. They had milled around, probably assessing the damage, discussing options. Then they had walked away, heading northwest toward the timberline. One set of prints was smaller than the others, the stride shorter. A woman's boots. Cole followed the tracks into the forest. The trail led him through stands of ponderosa and aspen, the trees providing windbreaks that had preserved more of the footprints. He found a place where the group had stopped a clearing where they had attempted to build a fire, the charred sticks and ashes still visible beneath fresh snow. They had not stayed long, the fire not large enough or hot enough to provide much warmth. From there, the tracks continued, and Cole's skill as a hunter served him now. He read the signs like text, seeing the story written in disturbed snow and broken branches. Someone was injured, their gait uneven. Someone else had fallen, the imprint of a body clear in a drift. But they had kept moving, driven by the certain knowledge that stopping meant dying. An hour later he saw the smoke. It rose thin and pale through the trees, barely visible against the gray sky, but to Cole's experienced eye it might as well have been a beacon. He urged Thunder forward, his heart racing with hope and fear in equal measure. The trapper's cabin was exactly where he remembered it from hunting trips in better weather. One room built from logs and chinked with moss, a stone fireplace that actually drew well a luxury in wilderness construction. It was a place Cole himself had used when ranging far from home, and he felt a surge of relief that the stage passengers had found it. He dismounted and tied Thunder to a pine tree, then approached cautiously, not wanting to startle whoever was inside. "Hello in the cabin," he called. "My name is Cole Brennan from Salida. I'm looking for someone." The door opened, and a man with a grizzled beard and careful eyes peered out. He was perhaps 50, with the weathered look of someone who had spent his life outdoors, and his left side was wrapped in makeshift bandaging. "Thank the Lord," the man said, relief flooding his voice. "Another living soul. Come in out of the cold." The interior was warmer than outside, but still cold enough to see breath. A small fire burned in the hearth, carefully tended to make the limited wood last. 3 people huddled around it, and they turned as Cole entered, their faces lighting with the desperate hope of the stranded. An older woman, perhaps 60, her hands wrapped in strips torn from her petticoat. A younger man, Chinese features, sitting with his leg elevated and splinted. And the bearded man who had opened the door holding his ribs as if they pained him. But no blonde woman, no Elizabeth Harper. "I'm Bill Fletcher," the bearded man said, extending his hand. "Stage driver. These are my passengers, Mrs. Irene Davis and Jacob Chen." Cole shook hands mechanically, his eyes still searching the cabin's corners as if Beth might materialize from the shadows. "There were more of you," he said. "I counted 6 sets of tracks from the coach." "There were," Mrs. Davis said, her voice cultured and Eastern. "2 others made it here with us, but they left." Where did they go?" Bill Fletcher and Mrs. Davis exchanged glances, some communication passing between them that Cole could not read. "Mr. Brennan," Bill said carefully, "who exactly are you looking for?" "Elizabeth Harper. She was traveling to Salida to meet me. We were to be married." Mrs. Davis's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy or pity or both. Oh, that brave, brave girl. Cole's world narrowed to a pinpoint. "Where is she?" "She left," Mrs. Davis said gently. "Yesterday at dawn. We tried to stop her, we truly did, but she would not listen." The cabin floor seemed to tilt beneath Cole's feet. "Left alone. In this weather?" Jacob Chen nodded, his English accented but clear. "She was very determined. She said someone was waiting for her, would be worried. She said she had promised to come, and she would keep that promise." Bill Fletcher looked down at his hands. "I told her it was suicide, told her to wait, that help would come eventually, but she said she didn't come all this way from Boston to sit and wait when she was only 20 miles from her future." He met Cole's eyes. "She's got spine, that one. Tended my ribs without flinching, set Jacob's ankle like she'd done it before, treated Mrs. Davis's frostbite with willow bark tea. She was the strongest of all of us, which is why I thought she might actually make it." "Might." The word came out harsh. Mrs. Davis reached into her coat and pulled out a small leather journal. "She asked me to give this to you if you came looking. She said if she didn't make it, you should know she tried. That she wanted you to know she wasn't a quitter." Cole took the journal with hands that had steadied cattle in thunderstorms and held his dying wife, but now trembled like leaves. He opened it to the first page and saw Beth's careful script. "Mr. Brennan, if you are reading this, it means I have failed in my journey to you. I am sorry for that. I am sorry for the worry I have caused, for the promise I could not keep. But I want you to know that I tried. I walked into that snow with your letters in my heart and the image of your words in my mind. You wrote to me once that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. I chose to act. I chose you. If that was foolish, I die a fool. If it was brave, I die knowing I faced my fear for something that mattered. Either way, I regret only that I will not see your face, hold your son, share the life we planned in 47 letters. Yours always, Elizabeth. The words blurred. Cole closed the journal and tucked it carefully into his coat pocket next to the letters she had carried, adding them to the weight over his heart. Which way did she go? His voice was steady now, iron hard with purpose. Bill pointed west, followed Cottonwood Creek, said the stage driver told her it led straight to Salida, about 20 miles. How long ago? 28 hours, give or take. 28 hours in sub-zero temperatures. Most people wouldn't last half that. But Beth wasn't most people. She was a woman who had lost everything, rebuilt herself, and bet her entire future on 47 letters from a stranger. She was a woman who had tended injuries and made plans and walked into a blizzard because she had given her word. She might still be alive. Cole turned to the survivors. I'm leaving supplies with you. Food, blankets, medical supplies. Help will come within 2 days. I'm sending word to town as soon as I find her. You think she's alive, Mrs. Davis asked softly. I have to. He was out the door before they could respond, untying Thunder and swinging into the saddle in one fluid motion. The gelding sensed his urgency and moved without prompting, heading west at a careful trot that was the fastest safe pace through the deep snow. Cole began to call her name. Elizabeth Beth. His voice rang out through the silent forest, echoing off the mountains, swallowed by the emptiness. He called until his throat was raw, pausing only to listen for a response that never came. The afternoon waned, the short winter day, already surrendering to dusk. Cole knew he should stop, make camp, preserve his strength and Thunder's for tomorrow. But the thought of Beth out here alone in the growing darkness drove him forward. Elizabeth Beth Harper. The sun touched the western peaks, turning them gold, then orange, then red like fire. The temperature began to drop, the cold intensifying with nightfall. Cole's fingers were numb inside his gloves, his face masked with ice from his frozen breath. Elizabeth! And then in the gathering darkness he saw it, a dark shape against the white snow, small and still, perhaps 100 yards ahead. At first Cole thought it might be a fallen log or an outcropping of rock, but something about the shape, the wrongness of it in the landscape, made his heart hammer against his ribs. He touched his heels to Thunder's sides, urging the tired horse into a gallop. Snow flew from the gelding's hooves. The distance closed. 50 yards. 30. 20. It was a person huddled at the base of a boulder, wrapped in a dark cloak that was crusted with ice and frozen stiff. Cole was out of the saddle before Thunder had fully stopped running the last 15 feet, his legs numb and clumsy. He fell to his knees beside the figure and pulled back the hood with shaking hands. A woman's face, pale as death, framed by blonde hair matted with snow. Her lips were blue, her skin waxy with cold. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes. One gloved hand clutched a small bundle pressed against her chest, and Cole saw it was the daguerreotype of her parents, held so tightly that even unconscious she would not release it. Beth, he said, his voice breaking. Elizabeth. He put 2 fingers against her throat, searching for a pulse. For a terrible moment he felt nothing. Then faint as a whisper, a flutter beneath his fingertips. Her heart still beat. Beth, he said again, louder, shaking her shoulder gently. Beth, wake up. Her eyelids moved the smallest flutter and then opened. Her eyes were the blue of a summer sky, vivid against her pale skin, and they focused on his face with obvious difficulty. Cole. The word was barely a breath. His heart, which had been frozen with fear, suddenly blazed with warmth, so intense it hurt. Yes. I'm Cole. I'm here now. A ghost of a smile touched her blue lips. I knew you would come. Then her eyes closed again, and she went limp in his arms. Cole's hands moved with the methodical precision of a man who understood that panic killed faster than cold. He stripped off his gloves and pressed his bare fingers against Beth's throat again, counting the heartbeats. 40 per minute, slow but steady. Her breathing was shallow, barely misting the frigid air. Advanced hypothermia, he knew. The body shutting down systems to protect the core, surrendering the extremities to save the vital organs. He had perhaps an hour before those vital organs began to fail. Working quickly, Cole pulled the extra blankets from Thunder's saddlebags. He wrapped the first around Beth's torso, tucking it tight to trap what little body heat remained. The second he folded and placed beneath her, lifting her from the frozen ground that was leaching away her warmth. Her cloak was stiff as board, the fabric frozen solid, and he left it in place for now. Removing it here in the open would only expose her to more cold. "Stay with me, Beth," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We're almost there." He lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she was, how fragile she felt against his chest. The daguerreotype of her parents fell from her grip, and Cole caught it with one hand, tucking it into his coat pocket alongside her journal and letters. Everything she valued, everything she had carried from Boston, he would carry now. Getting her onto Thunder while maintaining the blankets proved difficult, but Cole had spent years working cattle and horses, and his hands knew how to manage awkward loads. He mounted first, then pulled Beth up to sit in front of him, cradled against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel the cold radiating from her body, even through the layers of wool and leather. The line shack was less than a mile west. He remembered it clearly from a hunting trip 2 autumns ago. A mile. Thunder could manage a mile. Cole touched his heels to the gelding's flanks, and the exhausted horse moved forward into the deepening dusk. He talked to Beth as they rode, keeping his voice steady and calm, willing her to hear him to hold on. "I got your letters," he said. "All 47 of them. I read them every night. The one about your father's watch shop, how he taught you to see the beauty in precision. The one about your mother reading Wordsworth on rainy afternoons. The one where you said loneliness was like a room with all the doors closed and you were looking for a window." Thunder's hooves crunched through the snow, the only other sound the wind in the pines. "Sam wants to meet you," Cole continued. "He's been asking questions for months. What do you look like? What's your favorite color? Do you know any good stories I told him you wrote, like someone who reads a lot, so you probably know hundreds of stories?" Beth's breathing remained shallow, but her head shifted slightly against his shoulder, and Cole chose to believe that meant she heard him. "I built a room for you," he said. "Added it onto the cabin last spring. It's not fancy, but it has a window facing east, so you can watch the sunrise. I made the frame myself, planned the wood smooth. Put in glass windows, real glass from Denver, because I wanted you to have light." The line shack emerged from the darkness, a solid black rectangle against the snow. Cole felt a surge of relief so intense it made his hands shake. He dismounted carefully, keeping Beth cradled against him, and kicked the door open. The interior was exactly as he remembered. One room perhaps 10 feet square with a small iron stove in the corner, a rough wooden bunk against one wall, and a few basic supplies left by the summer range riders who used this place. Most importantly, there was a stack of split wood beside the stove, dry and ready to burn. Cole laid Beth on the bunk, then turned his attention to the fire. He worked with the speed that came from years of frontier living, checking the stove's chimney first for any obstructions that might cause smoke to back up into the small space. Finding it clear, he arranged tinder kindling and larger pieces in the precise configuration that would provide maximum heat with minimum smoke. The match flared, the tinder caught, and within minutes flames were licking at the kindling. Cole fed the fire carefully, building it to a steady burn, then opened the stove door to let more heat into the room. Only when he was certain the fire would hold did he turn back to Beth. Her face had not regained color. Her lips remained blue. He knelt beside the bunk and began removing the frozen outer layers, peeling away the ice-crusted cloak to reveal a traveling dress beneath the fabric soaked through with melted snow. Her boots were caked with ice, her stockings visible through splits in the leather. This was the delicate part, the part that required him to balance Victorian propriety with medical necessity. Cole had seen enough death to know that modesty meant nothing if the patient died. "Elizabeth," he said, shaking her shoulder gently, "I need you to wake up. Your clothes are wet. You'll freeze if we don't get you warm and dry." Her eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. "Where?" "Safe. A line shack. But wet clothes will kill you faster than cold. I have a dry shirt. I'll turn around while you change, but I need you to try." She nodded a barely perceptible movement and attempted to sit up. Her hands fumbled at the buttons of her dress, but her fingers would not cooperate. After watching her struggle for nearly a minute, Cole heard her voice small and frightened. "I can't. My fingers won't work." Cole closed his eyes briefly, gathering his resolve. "I can help. I'll only do what's necessary. I promise you, Beth, I'm a gentleman." "I know." The words were slurred with cold, but they held trust. With as much decorum as the situation allowed, Cole helped her out of the wet dress and into his spare flannel shirt. It hung on her small frame like a nightgown reaching past her knees. He kept his eyes averted from anything that propriety demanded, remain unseen, focusing on the practical task of preserving life. Her hands and feet concerned him most. Several fingers showed the telltale white waxy appearance of frostbite, the skin hard to the touch. Her toes, when he carefully removed her boots and stockings, showed similar damage. He had seen frostbite before, had treated it in cattle and in men. The key was gradual rewarming, never rapid heat that could damage tissue further. Cole wrapped her hands and feet in clean cloths, then bundled her in both blankets and moved her closer to the stove. The fire was burning well now, the small room warming to a temperature that would preserve rather than harm. While Beth dozed, he went back outside to tend Thunder. The gelding had earned rest and care, and Cole led him to a small lean-to attached to the shack where previous users had stored a bit of hay. He rubbed Thunder down, checked his legs for ice buildup, and fed him from the oat bag. The horse would recover given rest and food. Inside again, Cole assessed their supplies. The line shack had been stocked with basic provisions, canned beans, coffee flour, a bit of sugar. Combined with the jerky and hardtack in his saddlebags, they had enough food for several days if needed. He put coffee on to boil the rich smell filling the small space, then opened a can of beans and set them to warm on top of the stove. Practical food, nothing fancy, but it would provide calories and warmth. Beth stirred as the coffee began to bubble, her eyes opening with more clarity than before. She looked around the cabin at the fire at Cole moving efficiently between tasks, and something that might have been wonder crossed her face. "You're real," she said softly. "I thought maybe I was dreaming, that I'd died and my mind was creating what I wanted to see." Cole poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to her kneeling beside the bunk. "I'm real. And you're alive. Though that was closer than I'd like." She took the cup in both bandaged hands, holding it more for warmth than to drink, though she did manage a small sip. The coffee seemed to revive her, further bringing color to her cheeks that the fire alone had not. "You came," she said, and there was such gratitude in her voice that Cole felt something crack open in his chest. "Of course I came. You gave me your word you'd arrive. I gave you mine that I'd be waiting. When you didn't show up at the station, I knew something was wrong. The stage crashed. 3 days ago, I think, maybe 4. Time got confused." She sipped more coffee, her hands steadying. "We found the cabin, the other passengers and I. But I couldn't stop thinking about you waiting, not knowing. I thought if I could just get to Salida, I could send word back help for the others." "That was brave," Cole said. "Also possibly the most foolish thing I've ever heard." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "My father said stubbornness was my defining trait." He was right. Cole moved to the stove and dished beans onto 2 tin plates, bringing them back to the bunk. "Eat. You need calories." They ate in companionable silence, Beth managing only a few bites before exhaustion overtook her appetite. Cole finished both portions, knowing he would need his strength for the journey tomorrow. When the plates were set aside, Beth looked at him with those startling blue eyes studying his face as if memorizing it. "You look exactly like I imagined," she said. "From your letters, I mean. I pictured someone weathered but kind. Someone who chose his words carefully because he valued truth over prettiness." Cole felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the fire. "I pictured you different," he admitted. "Not better or worse. Just different. Softer maybe, more fragile. And now I know you're made of steel wrapped in silk. She laughed, a sound that seemed too bright for the small cabin, too alive for someone who had been nearly dead an hour ago. The laugh turned into a cough, and Cole helped her sit up, supporting her until the spasm passed. "Your ribs," he said, noticing how she held her side. "You're hurt." "From the crash. I hit the side of the coach when we tipped. It's just bruised, I think." Cole wanted to check to assess the damage properly, but the bounds of propriety had already been stretched thin. "If it gets worse, you need to tell me. Broken ribs can puncture a lung." "I will." She settled back against the rough pillow he had made from his coat. "Tell me about Sam. I want to know everything." So Cole talked. He told her about Sam's birth 3 weeks early and coming so fast that there had been no time to fetch the doctor. He told her about Margaret holding that tiny red-faced infant and laughing with joy, even as she bled, about how they had named him Samuel after Margaret's father who died in the war. He told her about the fever, how it came on sudden and fierce when Sam was 5, how Margaret had fought it for 3 days before the strength left her body, but never her eyes. How she had made Cole promise to raise Sam right, to teach him to be strong and kind in equal measure, to find love again when he was ready, because she could not bear the thought of him alone. "She was right," Beth said softly. "You shouldn't be alone." "Neither should you." "No," Beth agreed. "Neither should I." The fire crackled and popped shadows dancing on the log walls. Outside, the wind had picked up, howling around the corners of the shack, but inside they were warm and safe, and against all odds together. "What happens now?" Beth asked. "When we get to Salida, I mean." Cole considered the question, aware that he was about to make a promise that would change both their lives. "You'll stay with Dorothy Hayes. She runs the boarding house. Good woman, practically raised Sam with me. You'll recover there, get proper medical care from Doc Pierce. We'll get to know each other face to face instead of through letters. And when you're ready, when you're certain this is what you want, we'll marry. And if I decide I don't want this life, then I'll give you money for the stage back to Denver and enough to start over wherever you choose. No hard feelings, no obligations." Beth was quiet for a long moment, her eyes on the fire. "What if I told you I already know that I don't need time to decide?" Cole's heart hammered against his ribs. "I'd say you've been through trauma, that you're not in a position to make clear decisions." "Cole Brennan," she said, and there was steel in her voice now, the same steel that had carried her through a blizzard. "I am 22 years old. I have buried both my parents, run a business, crossed a continent alone, and walked 20 miles through snow that should have killed me. I know my own mind, and I know I want this. I want you. I want Sam. I want the life we talked about in 47 letters. Even though you've only known me for a few hours, I've known you for 6 months. These letters," she touched his coat pocket where he had stored hers, "they told me everything I needed to know. You're a man who keeps his word, who rides into blizzards for strangers, who builds rooms with eastern windows for women he's never met. That's the man I said yes to. That's the man I nearly died reaching, and I'm not changing my mind now." Cole found himself smiling, really smiling for the first time in longer than he could remember. "You are the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Good thing you like stubborn women, then." "Who says I like stubborn women?" "You married one before, and you're about to marry another." The word married hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Cole reached out and took her bandaged hand in his, careful of the frostbite, and felt her fingers curl around his palm. "When we get to Salida," he said, "when you're healed and rested, we'll do this right. Proper wedding, the whole town invited. I want everyone to see that Elizabeth Harper chose me, that I'm the luckiest man in Colorado." "The luckiest man who nearly froze to death saving a foolish woman," Beth corrected. "The luckiest man who found his future half dead in a snowbank and got to bring her home." They sat that way for a long time, hands joined, watching the fire burn down to embers. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Beth, and her eyes drifted closed, her breathing deepening into sleep. Cole sat beside the bunk, unwilling to move and disturb her rest, keeping watch through the night. As dawn approached, gray light filtering through the gaps in the shutters, Cole finally allowed himself to close his eyes. But sleep did not come. His mind was too full of plans and worries of the journey ahead and the threats waiting in Salida. Warren Blackwood would not have been idle these 3 days. The legal challenge to his water rights was real, and Judge Morrison's bias was well known. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight he had done what he set out to do. He had found Beth. He had saved her, and somehow, impossibly, she had saved him too. Back in the ranch house in 1898, the fire had burned lower. Sam shifted his sleeping son in his arms, the 18-month-old, making small sounds in his sleep. James had set aside his book and was listening intently. "Pa," Sam said, his voice quiet in the peaceful room. "That was the night you knew that you and Ma were meant to be." Cole, still sitting in his chair with his whiskey, glanced at Beth. At 60, she remained beautiful to him, her silvering hair catching the firelight. She smiled at him with the quiet contentment that 15 years of partnership had brought. "I knew before that," Cole admitted. "I knew when I read her first letter 6 months before we met. But that night in the line shack when she told me she'd walked through a blizzard because she'd given her word, that's when I knew she was stronger than me, braver than me, and that if I had any sense, I'd spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her." Beth rose and crossed to him, settling on the arm of his chair, her hand on his shoulder. "You've been worthy every day since." Sam smiled at his parents, then looked down at his own son. "I hope I can tell him stories like that someday, about how I met his ma, about how our family started." "You will," Beth assured him. "Every family has its stories. This is ours." Cole took Beth's hand and squeezed it gently, then turned his eyes back to the fire, back to the memories. Morning in the line shack came cold and bright. Cole woke to find Beth already awake, sitting up in the bunk and examining her bandaged hands in the pale light coming through the shutters. "How do they feel?" he asked, rising from the floor where he had finally dozed in the small hours. "Tingly, painful, but I can move the fingers." "That's good. Means the tissue is coming back. You'll likely keep all your digits, though there might be scarring. Small price for surviving." Cole rebuilt the fire, made fresh coffee, and prepared a simple breakfast of hardtack, softened in the coffee, and what remained of the beans. While they ate, he assessed Beth's condition properly in the daylight. Her color had improved dramatically, though her face still showed the pallor of exposure. Her lips were no longer blue. Her hands and feet, while still swollen and tender, showed signs of healing rather than necrosis. "We need to get you to a doctor," he said. "Doc Pierce in Salida is competent. He can treat the frostbite properly, check your ribs, make sure there's no lasting damage." "How far is Salida?" "About 15 miles. If we leave within the hour, we can make it by evening." Beth nodded, then looked down at herself, still wearing only his flannel shirt over her undergarments. "I don't suppose my dress dried." Cole retrieved it from where he had hung it near the stove overnight. The fabric was dry but stiff, and when Beth tried to fasten the buttons, her bandaged fingers could not manage the small closures. "Here," Cole said, kneeling before her. "Let me." It was an intimate thing, fastening a woman's dress, his fingers working the small pearl buttons while she stood perfectly still watching his face. Cole kept his eyes on his task, aware of her nearness, of the faint scent of her skin beneath the smoke and coffee smell that permeated everything in the small cabin. "Thank you," she said when he finished. "You'll need warmer clothes. I'll wrap you in blankets for the ride." They prepared to leave with the methodical care of people who understood that the wilderness punished carelessness. Cole extinguished the fire completely, scattered the ashes, and restocked the wood supply for the next person who might need shelter. He packed their few supplies, helped Beth into her boots, and wrapped her in both wool blankets. Outside, Thunder nickered a greeting, rested and ready for the journey. Cole helped Beth mount, then swung up behind her, settling her against his chest as he had the night before. She fit there perfectly, her head tucked beneath his chin, her weight comfortable in his arms. The ride to Salida was nothing like the desperate race of the previous day. The weather had cleared the sky a brilliant blue, and the sun on the snow was almost blinding in its brightness. Cole kept Thunder to a steady walk, conserving the horse's strength, following the creek that would lead them home. They talked as they rode, the conversation flowing easily despite the strange circumstances of their meeting. Beth told him about Boston, about the narrow streets and brick buildings, the constant noise of carriages and voices, the way the sea smell would drift in on foggy mornings. She told him about her work as a seamstress, the wealthy ladies who would commission dresses and then complain about every stitch, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from fabric and thread. Cole told her about ranching, about the brutal honesty of working with cattle and horses, how the land taught you that nature respected effort but not wishes. He told her about water rights and grazing permits, about the constant battle with predators and weather, about the satisfaction of watching calves grow strong on good grass. "It sounds hard," Beth said. "It is." "Good. I'm not afraid of hard work." As they drew closer to Salida, Cole felt tension returning to his shoulders. The legal challenge from Warren Blackwood hung over him like a storm cloud, and he knew that arriving in town with Beth would trigger a cascade of events he could not fully control. "There's something you should know," he said, "about my situation. It's complicated." He told her about Blackwood, about the water rights challenge, and the legal hearing scheduled for Monday, about the judge's bias and the threat to his land. He told her about the Homestead Act and prior appropriation doctrine, about how the laws that were meant to protect settlers could be twisted by men with lawyers and money. Beth listened without interrupting, her body tense against his. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So if you lose," she said finally, "you lose everything." "Yes." "Your ranch, your home, Sam's inheritance?" "Yes." "And you spent 3 days searching for me instead of preparing your defense?" "Yes." She turned in the saddle to look at him, her blue eyes fierce. "Then we'll fight him together. I'm not just marrying you, Cole. I'm marrying into this battle. We'll find a way." "Beth, you don't understand. Blackwood is powerful. He has connections, money, lawyers. I'm just a rancher." "You're not just anything," she said firmly. "You're a man who keeps his word, and I'm a woman who survived things that should have killed me. Between us, we're more than enough for Warren Blackwood." Cole found himself believing her. The town of Salida appeared in the distance, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along the main road, smoke rising from chimneys into the clear afternoon air. As they approached, Cole could see people on the street going about their daily business, and he knew that their arrival would not go unnoticed. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time Cole and Beth reached the center of town, a small crowd had gathered, faces familiar and curious voices raised in questions and exclamations. Dorothy Hayes pushed through the crowd, her capable face stern with worry that melted into relief when she saw Beth alive in Cole's arms. Behind her came Sam running from the boarding house, his young face split with a grin. "Pa, you found her." Cole dismounted and helped Beth down, keeping a supportive arm around her waist when her legs threatened to buckle. The crowd pressed closer, everyone talking at once, but Cole only had eyes for his son. "Sam," he said, "I'd like you to meet Miss Elizabeth Harper." Beth, leaning heavily on Cole's arm, managed a warm smile despite her exhaustion. She looked at Sam with genuine warmth. "You must be Sam. I've heard so much about you." Sam's enthusiasm faltered into sudden shyness. He looked at his father, then back at Beth, his expression complicated. "You're really going to stay? You're going to be my new ma?" "I hope we can be friends first," Beth said gently. "Would that be all right with you?" Sam nodded, but Cole saw the wariness in his son's eyes, the conflict between wanting to accept this new person and feeling disloyal to the mother he remembered. Before anyone could say more, Dr. Edward Pierce pushed through the crowd, his black medical bag in hand. He was a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen everything frontier medicine could throw at him. "Let's get her inside and take a proper look," he said, taking Beth's arm. "Mrs. Hayes, if you would be so kind as to provide a room." "Of course, Edward. This way." The crowd parted and Cole started to follow, but Sheriff Frank Porter stepped into his path. The lawman was perhaps 48, with a gray-streaked mustache and eyes that had seen too much to be easily surprised. "Cole," he said quietly, "glad you made it back." But you need to know Blackwood's been busy while you were gone." Cole's jaw tightened. "What did he do?" The sheriff pulled a folded document from his coat. "Filed formal charges this morning. Claims you trespassed on his property 2 weeks ago and damaged his new irrigation dam. Says he has witnesses." "That's a lie. I haven't been on Blackwood property in months." "I know, but he's got 2 men willing to swear otherwise. Judge Morrison set a hearing for tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow? I just got back." "I know. Convenient timing, isn't it?" The sheriff's expression was sympathetic but firm. "You need to be there, Cole. If you miss it, Morrison will rule by default and Blackwood will have legal grounds to file for your water rights." Cole felt the trap closing around him. He had known Blackwood would move fast, but this was faster than he had anticipated. The man had used Cole's absence to build a case line up false witnesses and set the legal machinery in motion. "I'll be there," Cole said. "Good. And Cole, get yourself a lawyer. Thomas Sullivan's been trying to file counterclaims on your behalf, but you need professional representation." Cole nodded, though they both knew there was exactly one lawyer in Salida, and he worked for Warren Blackwood. Inside Dorothy's boarding house, Dr. Pierce examined Beth with professional thoroughness. Cole waited in the hallway, pacing like a caged animal while Dorothy kept him company, and Sam sat on the stairs watching everything with wide eyes. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "She's going to be fine," he said. "Moderate frostbite on the fingers and toes, but I believe she'll retain full use of all digits. Bruised ribs, as she said, but no breaks that I can detect. The hypothermia was severe, but she's young and strong, and you got her warm in time." Cole felt a weight lift from his chest. "So she'll recover fully?" "With proper care and rest, yes. 2 weeks minimum of staying warm, keeping the extremities elevated and bandaged. No exposure to cold. And," he looked meaningfully at Dorothy, "proper food and plenty of it. She's too thin." "I'll see to it," Dorothy promised. "Can I see her?" Cole asked. Dr. Pierce nodded. "Briefly. She needs rest, but I imagine she'll want to see you before she sleeps." Cole climbed the stairs to the small room Dorothy had prepared, knocked softly, and entered when he heard Beth's voice bid him come in. She was in bed, propped up on pillows, wearing one of Dorothy's nightgowns. Her hands and feet were freshly bandaged, and her face showed the exhaustion of the past days, but her eyes were bright and alert. "The doctor says you'll be fine," Cole said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "I know. I told him I would be, but he insisted on examining everything twice." She smiled. "He's very thorough. He's a good man." Cole reached for her hand, careful of the bandages. "Beth, I have to tell you something. There's a legal hearing tomorrow. Blackwood filed false charges against me while I was gone, and if I don't show up, I could lose everything." "Then you'll show up?" Beth said simply. "And you'll fight." "It's not that simple. The judge is Blackwood's cousin. I don't have a lawyer. The whole thing is rigged against me." Beth's eyes narrowed, and Cole saw something calculating in her expression, something that reminded him she was not just a survivor, but a strategist. "Tell me everything about this Warren Blackwood, everything you know." So Cole told her. He told her about Blackwood's history of using legal manipulation to acquire land, about the 3 families he had pushed out in the past 5 years, about his connections to Judge Morrison and the Territorial Land Office. He told her about the water rights challenge and the alleged irrigation ditch from 1859. Beth listened intently, asking sharp questions that revealed a mind trained to see patterns and possibilities. When Cole finished, she was quiet for a moment, thinking. "He's a bully," she said finally. "And I learned something working in Boston. Bullies rely on people being too scared or too tired to fight back. But they're not invincible. They have weaknesses." "What weakness does Blackwood have?" "His ego," Beth said. "Men like that, they need everyone to know how clever they are. They can't resist explaining how they've won. We need to make him feel safe enough to brag and stupid enough to do it where it matters." Cole stared at her, seeing not the delicate seamstress from Boston, but something harder and more dangerous. You're talking about setting a trap. I'm talking about fighting smart instead of fair, because he's not fighting fair." Before Cole could respond, there was a knock at the door. Dorothy entered, her expression troubled. "Cole, you have a visitor downstairs, Warren Blackwood." Cole stood, his hand instinctively going to his hip, where his pistol would normally hang, but he had left his weapons downstairs out of respect for Dorothy's house. "I'll be right there." He turned to Beth. "Stay here. Rest. I'll handle this." But Beth was already pushing back the covers. "Not a chance. If he's here, it's because he wants to gloat. Let him see what he's up against." Against his better judgment, Cole helped her into a dressing gown and supported her as she slowly descended the stairs. Dorothy made disapproving noises but did not try to stop them. Warren Blackwood stood in the boarding house parlor, examining Dorothy's collection of ceramic figurines with the air of a man evaluating livestock. He turned when he heard them enter, and his expression shifted from casual superiority to something sharper when he saw Beth. "Well," he said smoothly, "the famous mail-order bride. Alive after all. How fortunate." "Mr. Blackwood," Cole said coldly, "state your business and leave." "Direct as always, Brennan. I like that about you." Warren's eyes remained on Beth, assessing. "I came to welcome Miss Harper to Salida, and to inform you both of tomorrow's hearing. Wouldn't want there to be any confusion about the time or place." "There's no confusion." "Good, good." Warren smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I also wanted to make you an offer, a generous one considering the circumstances. I'm not interested in your offers. Hear me out. You've had a hard few days riding through that storm, nearly dying. Your bride here looks like she could use months of recovery. Wouldn't it be easier to just sell me the ranch? I'm prepared to offer $800, more than fair market value." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Cole took a step forward, his voice deadly quiet. "My wife's grave is on that land. My son's childhood is in that house. 5 years of my sweat and blood are in those fields. You think I'd sell that for any amount of money? Your pride will bankrupt you, Brennan." It was Beth who spoke next, her voice clear and surprisingly strong for someone who should have been bedbound. "Mr. Blackwood, I wonder if you could explain something to me. I'm new to Colorado, you see, and I don't understand all the legal intricacies. This claim you've filed about irrigation rights from 1859, how exactly did your grandfather establish beneficial use? What crops did he irrigate? Where are the records of those harvests?" Warren's smile froze. "That's a matter for tomorrow's hearing." "Of course," Beth said pleasantly. "I'm just curious because in Boston we learned that water rights require continuous beneficial use. If there was a gap, even a few years, the rights could be considered abandoned. But I'm sure you've documented every year from 1859 to present. That would be 24 years of continuous use. Quite a paper trail." Cole saw understanding dawn in Blackwood's eyes. This pale woman in a dressing gown was not some delicate flower to be intimidated. She was dangerous. "The law will decide what's documented and what's not," Warren said stiffly. "Indeed it will," Beth agreed. "I look forward to tomorrow's hearing. I've never seen the American legal system in action." Warren looked between them, his expression calculating. "You're making a mistake, both of you. I'm trying to be reasonable here. But if you insist on fighting, you'll lose, and when you lose, you'll have nothing. No ranch, no home, nowhere to raise that boy of yours." "Get out," Cole said. Warren smiled again, back in control. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock at the land office. Don't be late, Brennan. The judge doesn't like to be kept waiting." He tipped his hat to Beth. "Miss Harper, such a pleasure to meet you. I hope you survive your recovery. It would be a shame to come all this way only to die of complications." The threat was barely veiled, and Cole's hands curled into fists, but Beth's hand on his arm stopped him from moving. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood," she said coolly. When he was gone, Dorothy shut the door firmly and turned to them. "That man is poison. That man just made a mistake." Beth said, her voice thoughtful. "He underestimated us. People always underestimate the woman who survived what should have killed her." Cole looked at his bride to be this woman he had rescued from the snow and realized with sudden clarity that she had rescued him just as surely. He had been fighting alone for so long, carrying every burden by himself, that he had forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand beside him. "We should get you back to bed," he said gently. Beth nodded, allowing him to help her back up the stairs. At the door to her room she turned and looked up at him. "Tomorrow we fight," she said. "Tonight you rest. And Cole, thank you for coming after me, for believing I was worth saving." "You were always worth saving," he said. "From the first letter you were worth everything." She stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek, the touch feather light and over in a moment, but it burned like a brand. "Good night, Cole." "Good night, Beth." Cole walked down the stairs to find Sam waiting for him in the parlor, curled up in one of Dorothy's chairs. The boy looked up, his expression uncertain. "Is she really staying, Pa?" "She is. And you're really going to marry her?" "I am." Sam was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "Do you love her?" It was a child's question, direct and impossible to dodge. Cole sat down in the chair across from his son and looked him in the eyes. "I love who she is in her letters," Cole said honestly. "I love her courage and her intelligence and her stubbornness. I love that she risked everything to keep her word. Will I love her the same way I loved your mother? No. Because she's not your mother, and I won't dishonor either of them by pretending otherwise. But I think I can love her in a different way, a way that honors the past while building the future. Does that make sense?" Sam nodded slowly. "I think so." He paused, then added quietly, "She seems nice, but I don't want to forget Ma." Cole pulled his son into a hug. "You'll never forget her. I won't let you. We'll tell you stories about her, keep her memory alive. Loving Beth doesn't mean forgetting Margaret. It means our family is growing, not replacing." "Okay," Sam whispered against his father's chest. "Okay." They sat that way for a while, father and son, until Dorothy came to tell them supper was ready. And upstairs in her narrow bed, Beth lay awake thinking about tomorrow's battle and the life that waited beyond it. Dawn broke over Salida with the pale light of late December, and Cole stood at the window of Dorothy's guest room watching the town come alive. He had not slept. The legal hearing loomed at 9 o'clock, and his mind had spent the dark hours turning over possibilities, strategies, defenses that all seemed to crumble against the simple fact that Judge Morrison would rule however his cousin wanted. Behind him, Thomas Sullivan spoke quietly. The Irishman had arrived an hour before dawn with news, none of it good. "I filed the counterclaims like you asked," Thomas said. "Cited your Homestead Act rights, your 5 years of continuous improvement, your proven water usage. But Morrison's clerk wouldn't even look at the documents properly. Just stamped them and said they'd be reviewed at the hearing." "Which means they won't be reviewed at all," Cole said flatly. "Aye, and there's more. Blackwood rode out to your ranch yesterday with 3 men. They redirected part of Cottonwood Creek, built a crude dam upstream. Your cattle had no water for 12 hours before I could tear it down." Cole's hands clenched on the window frame. "He's forcing my hand. Wants me to do something stupid, give him an excuse to claim I'm violent or unstable." "Well, you are half those things," Thomas said with a grim smile. "But you're not stupid enough to fall for it." A soft knock at the door announced Dorothy carrying a tray with coffee and bread. "Breakfast," she said firmly. "You'll need your strength, and you'll think better with food in your belly." Cole forced himself to eat, though the bread tasted like sawdust, and the coffee could not wash away the bitter taste of impending defeat. At 8:30, he dressed in his best clothes, such as they were: a clean shirt, his only suit jacket, boots polished to a shine. If he was going to lose everything, he would at least look like a man who deserved to own land. He knocked on Beth's door before leaving and found her already dressed and sitting in the chair by the window. "You should be resting," he said. "I'm coming with you," Beth replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Beth, the doctor said 2 weeks of bed rest." "The doctor said many things. I'm choosing which to follow." She stood wavering slightly, but her jaw was set with determination. I'm your future wife, Cole. Where you go, I go, especially into battle." They arrived at the land office at 5 minutes before 9. The building was small, just one room that served as courthouse claims office and records repository. Already it was crowded with townspeople who had come to watch the proceedings. Cole saw Henry Clark and his wife, several other ranchers, Dorothy with Sam at her side, even Sheriff Porter standing in the back with his arms crossed. And at the front, sitting at a makeshift judge's bench, was Judge Henry Morrison. The judge was 60 years old, with the well-fed appearance of a man who had never missed a meal. His white hair was carefully combed, his suit expensive, his demeanor that of someone who believed his position granted him wisdom rather than merely authority. He looked up when Cole entered, and his expression showed no warmth. "Mr. Brennan," prompt at least, "please take your place." Warren Blackwood sat at a table to the right with his lawyer, Lucas Crane, a thin man in an expensive suit from Denver, who looked at the assembled townspeople with the barely concealed contempt of someone who considered frontier justice beneath him. Cole had no lawyer, no polished arguments, just the truth and the hope that it might somehow matter. Judge Morrison rapped his gavel a sound like a gunshot in the small room. "This hearing concerns water rights to Cottonwood Creek and allegations of trespass. Mr. Crane, present your case." The lawyer stood shuffling papers with practiced ease. "Your Honor, the facts are simple and documented. My client's grandfather, Harold Blackwood, filed claim to water rights from Cottonwood Creek in 1859, 24 years ago. Here is the original surveyor's map showing an irrigation ditch from the creek to what was then Blackwood land." He produced a yellowed map, carefully rolled and tied with ribbon. Cole leaned forward, trying to see details, but from his position at the defendant's table, he could only make out vague lines and notations. "This ditch," Crane continued, "represents beneficial use of the water which under Colorado's prior appropriation doctrine establishes superior rights. Mr. Brennan's deed, granted in 1873, is therefore subordinate. Furthermore, my client has witnesses who will testify that Mr. Brennan trespassed on Blackwood property 2 weeks ago and damaged irrigation equipment." "Where are these witnesses?" Judge Morrison asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. 2 men stood from the front row. Cole recognized them both as Blackwood's hired hands, rough types who would swear to anything for the right price. "Jake Murdoch and Seth Crawford," Crane said smoothly. "Both employed by Mr. Blackwood, both credible witnesses to Mr. Brennan's trespass." Judge Morrison nodded. "Mr. Brennan, do you have representation?" Cole stood, feeling every eye in the room upon him. "No, Your Honor, I represent myself." "Then present your defense." Cole pulled out the papers. Thomas had filed, his hands steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Your Honor, I have here documentation of my Homestead Act claim filed in 1873 and proven up in 1878. I have water rights records from the Denver Land Office showing my continuous beneficial use of Cottonwood Creek for 10 years. I have tax records, improvement records, livestock counts, everything required by law." "All of which is irrelevant if prior rights existed," Judge Morrison said. "But did they exist?" Cole asked. "This map Mr. Crane produced, it shows a ditch from 1859. But where are the records of beneficial use? What crops did Harold Blackwood irrigate? What harvests did he sell? If he had continuous beneficial use for 24 years, there should be extensive documentation." Crane stood quickly. "The records were lost in a fire at the Blackwood Ranch in 1870. "Convenient," Cole said. "Mr. Brennan," Judge Morrison's voice carried a warning, "confine yourself to facts, not speculation." From her seat in the front row, Beth stood. Her movement drew every eye, and Judge Morrison frowned. "Miss, this is not a public forum. Please be seated." "Mrs. Brennan, actually," Beth said calmly, "or very nearly, and I have a question for Mr. Crane. You have no standing in this proceeding." "I have every standing. I'm about to marry into this dispute. And my question is simple. Mr. Crane, you claim Harold Blackwood had continuous beneficial use from 1859 to present. But Harold Blackwood died in 1862, did he not? That's a matter of public record. So who maintained this beneficial use for the following 21 years until your client inherited in 1883? Crane's expression flickered just for a moment, but it was enough to show that Beth had struck a nerve. The land was maintained by hired managers. Their names, Beth pressed. I don't have that information readily available. Because they don't exist, Beth said. Because there was no continuous use. Your client's grandfather abandoned that ditch in 1862, which means under Colorado law, any prior rights were forfeited. Mr. Brennan's claim from 1873 is therefore superior, not subordinate. The room erupted in murmurs. Judge Morrison banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, Mrs. Brennan, you will be silent, or I will have you removed. But Beth had said what needed saying, and she sat down with a small, satisfied smile. Judge Morrison glared at her, then at Cole, then at the papers before him. Cole could see the calculation in his eyes. The judge wanted to rule for his cousin, but Beth had created doubt, had made the fraud obvious to everyone watching. If Morrison ruled for Blackwood now, it would be naked corruption, and even a biased judge had to maintain some appearance of fairness. I will take this matter under advisement, Morrison said finally. Ruling will be issued in 3 days. Court adjourned. It was not a victory, but it was not a defeat either. Cole helped Beth from the room while the crowd buzzed with conversation. Outside, Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. That woman of yours is something fierce, he said admiringly. I noticed, Cole replied. But Beth had gone pale, her strength finally exhausted. Cole swept her into his arms and carried her back to the boarding house, ignoring the protests about propriety. Dorothy met them at the door and shooed Cole out while she put Beth to bed. She needs rest, not excitement, Dorothy scolded. You've got 3 days until the ruling. Use them wisely. Cole did. He spent those 3 days gathering evidence, interviewing old-timers who remembered Harold Blackwood and his abandoned ditch, documenting his own improvements and water usage. Thomas rode to Denver and returned with official records from the Territorial Land Office showing gaps in Blackwood's ownership documentation. And on the 3rd day, Cole asked Beth to marry him, not in the way he had imagined with flowers and careful words and time for her to heal, but standing in Dorothy's parlor with Sam at his side and the legal ruling looming tomorrow, he knelt before her chair and took her bandaged hands in his. Elizabeth Harper, he said, I know this isn't how either of us imagined this moment. You're still recovering. I'm fighting for my home and we've barely known each other a week. But I don't want to wait. I don't want to face whatever comes next without you by my side legally and completely. Will you marry me tonight? Beth's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Yes, absolutely yes. The wedding took place at 9 o'clock that evening in the small church at the edge of town. Reverend Mills performed the ceremony by lamplight with perhaps 20 people in attendance. Dorothy served as matron of honor, Thomas as best man, and Sam as ring-bearer, holding the simple gold bands with such care that several women in the congregation wept at the sight. Beth wore a dress that Dorothy and the other town women had altered in a frantic afternoon of sewing cream-colored satin with lace at the collar. She was still pale, still weak, but when she walked down the aisle on Henry Clark's arm, Cole thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. The vows were traditional, but they added their own words. Cole promised to protect her, provide for her, and never let her face hardship alone. Beth promised to stand beside him in all seasons, to be partner, not burden, to love his son as her own. When Reverend Mills pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed Beth with a tenderness that spoke of his promise to cherish her always. And when they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, the applause was genuine and warm. The celebration afterward was brief cake and coffee in the church hall, quick congratulations from well-wishers who understood that tomorrow would bring either victory or ruin. But for these few hours, Cole allowed himself to simply be happy, to dance with his wife, to watch Sam slowly warm to this woman, who was now officially his stepmother. Late that night, lying in bed in the small room Dorothy had prepared for them, Beth curled against Cole's side and spoke into the darkness. "Whatever Judge Morrison rules tomorrow," she said softly, "we face it together." "Together," Cole agreed. But morning brought more than a legal ruling. It brought catastrophe. Cole woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Thomas shouting his name. He was dressed and out the door in seconds, Beth close behind, despite her weakened state, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The sky above his ranch glowed orange with fire. Even from a mile away he could see flames leaping into the night sky, could hear the terrified lowing of cattle and the screaming of horses. His barn was burning. Cole ran for Thunder, his only thought to reach his home, his animals, everything he had built. Thomas was already saddled, and together they galloped through the darkness, while Beth stood in the street with Dorothy and Sam, watching the distant flames paint the sky with destruction. The barn was fully engulfed when they arrived. The hayloft, packed with winter feed for the cattle, burned like a torch. Horses screamed in their stalls, frantic with terror. Cole and Thomas ran into the inferno without hesitation. The heat was like a physical force, searing their lungs, singeing their hair. Cole grabbed halters and began leading horses out one by one, while Thomas worked the other end of the stable. Smoke choked them. Burning debris fell from the loft. The roar of the flames was deafening. Thunder came first, eyes rolling white with fear, but trusting Cole enough to follow. Then the mare Beth would ride the draft horses they used for heavy work the young gelding Cole was training. 8 horses total, and they got 7 out before the loft collapsed, with a sound like thunder blocking access to the last stall. Cole tried to go back in, but Thomas grabbed him and physically hauled him away. "He's already gone, boss. You can't save him." They worked through the night fighting the fire with buckets of water from the creek that seemed pitifully small against the inferno. Neighbors arrived drawn by the glow and formed a bucket brigade. By dawn the barn was a smoking ruin. The hay completely destroyed, 1 horse dead, and Cole's face was black with soot and streaked with sweat. Sheriff Porter arrived with the sunrise, and his expression was grim. He walked the perimeter of the destroyed barn, examining the ground, the burn patterns, the debris. When he returned to where Cole stood, he held up a tin can. "Kerosene," the sheriff said. "Not your brand." And the fire started in 3 places at once. This was arson coal. Cole's jaw clenched. He did not need to ask who was responsible. There was only one man in Salida with reason to destroy his livelihood. "Blackwood," he said. "Can't prove it. He was in town at the saloon last night, multiple witnesses. His men all have alibis too." "Then who set the fire?" "Someone he paid likely. But without proof, without witnesses, there's nothing I can charge him with." Cole surveyed the damage with the numb precision of a man calculating losses. The barn itself would cost $300 to rebuild, the hay $200 to replace, the horse another $50, lost work time weeks, and they had no savings left. Beth had given him her Boston money for supplies. They were broke, their home damaged, and the legal ruling still hung over them like a sword. Beth arrived mid-morning, having convinced Dorothy to drive her out in the wagon despite doctor's orders. She found Cole sitting on the charred remains of a support beam, staring at the ruins, with the expression of a man who had been struck one too many times. "We'll rebuild," she said, sitting beside him despite her bandaged hands and still tender ribs. "With what money?" Cole asked, his voice hollow. "We'll find a way." "Beth, I've lost the barn, the hay, a horse. If Morrison rules against me tomorrow, I lose the water rights too. And without water, I can't run cattle. Without cattle, I can't pay the mortgage. We'll lose everything." Beth took his face in her hands and forced him to look at her. "Listen to me, Cole Brennan. You rode through a blizzard to save me. You fought a legal battle you were meant to lose. You built a life from nothing once before. You can do it again. And this time, you're not alone." But the next day brought worse news. Warren Blackwood filed formal charges against Cole for cattle poisoning. 12 head of Blackwood's cattle and 1 prize bull had been found dead that morning, strychnine in their feed. Boot prints at the scene matched Cole's size. A bottle of poison was found nearby, the same brand Cole used for predator control. And Blackwood's foreman swore he had seen someone matching Cole's description near the pasture at midnight. Cole was arrested on the steps of the land office as he arrived for Judge Morrison's ruling. The sheriff looked pained as he put the handcuffs on, but the law was the law. "I didn't do this," Cole said. "I believe you," Sheriff Porter replied. "But Blackwood has evidence witnesses and a judge who'll listen. You need bail, and you need it fast." Beth stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "How much?" "Judge hasn't said it yet. Probably $500. "I'll get it." Cole stared at his wife. "Beth, you don't have that kind of money. I don't have that kind of money." "Then I'll find it." She turned to Dorothy. "Can you help me?" Within 2 hours, Beth had secured the bail money by selling her mother's jewelry and borrowing from Henry Clark against future sewing commissions. Cole was released, but the damage was done. The town was divided now, some believing in his innocence, others whispering that maybe he had finally snapped under Blackwood's pressure. That night in their room at the boarding house, Beth laid out her plan. "He's framing you," she said, "which means he made mistakes. He always does. Men like Blackwood think they're clever, but arrogance makes them sloppy. We need to find those mistakes." Over the next 3 days, while Cole awaited trial for cattle poisoning and the judge's ruling on water rights, Beth investigated. Despite her injuries, despite the doctor's orders, she moved through Salida like a woman on a mission. She started at the general store checking purchase records. Cole had bought strychnine 6 months ago for predator control, but the bottle found at the scene was new, purchased just 2 weeks earlier. Purchased by Marcus Blackwood Warren's 14-year-old son. She visited the scene of the poisoning, sketching the boot prints. When compared to Cole's boots, she found a discrepancy. The prints showed nails in the heel, a repair Cole's boots did not have. She tracked down Seth Crawford Blackwood's foreman, who claimed to have seen Cole at midnight. She found him at the saloon deep in his cups and offered him $20 for the truth. "Blackwood paid me $50 to lie," Seth admitted, his voice slurred with whiskey. "Said I had to swear I saw Brennan, but I didn't see nobody. I wasn't even there that night." "Will you testify to that in court?" Beth asked. Seth's eyes widened with fear. "And have Blackwood come after me?" "No, ma'am. I value my skin too much." "Then write it down. Give me a signed statement. You don't have to testify, just give me the truth on paper." Seth was drunk enough to agree. He scrawled his confession on a piece of paper, signed it, and took Beth's $20. It would not hold up in court without his testimony, but it was evidence proof of the conspiracy. But Beth's investigation did not go unnoticed. Warren Blackwood heard that she was asking questions, gathering evidence, making trouble. And one evening, as she was leaving the general store after dark, she found herself cornered. Warren appeared from the shadows with 2 of his men flanking him. They blocked her path to the boarding house, and Beth's heart hammered against her ribs. "Mrs. Brennan," Warren said pleasantly, "you've been busy these past few days." "Gathering evidence," Beth replied, keeping her voice steady, "for my husband's defense. Evidence won't matter if you don't live to present it." The threat was barely veiled. Accidents happen to women who ask too many questions. A fall downstairs, a wagon accident, a fire in the night. So many ways for a sickly woman to die. Beth held his gaze, refusing to show fear. "You think I came alone? Sheriff Porter knows I'm here. So does Henry Clark. So do a dozen townspeople. If anything happens to me, you'll hang. You're bluffing." But before Warren could make good on his threat, Thomas Sullivan emerged from the shadows with 3 ranch hands all armed. "The lady's not bluffing," Thomas said calmly. "Boss sent us to keep an eye on her. Smart man, your husband." Warren's expression darkened, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. He stepped aside with false courtesy. "My apologies, Mrs. Brennan. I merely wanted to express my concern for your health. These investigations must be exhausting." "Not as exhausting as lying," Beth said, and walked past him with her head high. That night she told Cole everything she had found. The evidence of the forged water claim, the confession from Seth Crawford, the proof that the poisoning was staged. They had enough to create reasonable doubt, perhaps even to prove conspiracy. But they needed more. They needed Warren Blackwood to confess. "How do we get him to do that?" Cole asked. "He's not stupid enough to admit anything where it matters." Beth's eyes glinted with something dangerous. "We make him feel safe. We offer him what he wants most. Then we turn it against him." Her plan was risky, possibly insane, but it was their only chance. The next morning, Beth sent a message to Warren Blackwood. It read simply, "I accept your offer. Meet me at the old mill at noon. Come alone." Warren's response came within the hour. "Smart woman. See you there." Cole wanted to forbid it to protect Beth from the danger, but she reminded him of her words at their wedding. They were partners. Where one went, both went. They set the trap carefully. The old mill was abandoned, a grain processing building that had stood empty for years. It had good acoustics, multiple hiding spots, and only one entrance that could be controlled. Sheriff Porter would hide in the office upstairs with 2 deputies. Thomas and his men would cover the exits. Henry Clark would wait outside to prevent escape. And Sam, against Cole's better judgment, would hide in the loft as witness. The boy had insisted, arguing that a child would be the least suspicious presence if discovered. Beth would meet Warren alone or seemingly alone. The goal was to get him talking, to let his ego drive him to explain how he had orchestrated everything to get a confession with multiple witnesses present. Cole would be hidden with a rifle close enough to protect Beth if things went wrong. At noon exactly, Warren Blackwood rode up to the mill. He was alone as promised, though Cole suspected he had men waiting nearby as backup. Warren dismounted and entered the mill with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Beth was waiting inside, standing in a shaft of sunlight that made her seem smaller and more fragile than she was. "Mrs. Brennan," Warren said. "Punctual. I admire that." "Let's finish this," Beth replied. "You want me to leave Salida to annul my marriage to Cole. I want you to drop all charges and leave my husband alone. Tell me exactly what you're offering." "Simple. You sign annulment papers, get on the afternoon stage to Denver, and never return. In exchange, I drop the cattle poisoning charges, withdraw my water rights claim, and your husband keeps his ranch. Everyone wins. Except me." "You get to live," Warren said coldly. "That's more than you'll have if Cole goes to prison and you're left alone on a failing ranch." Beth pretended to consider. "Before I agree, I want to know, did you really do all of it? The water claim, the barn fire, poisoning your own cattle? Or is some of it real?" Warren smiled, unable to resist. "Oh, it's all real, all carefully planned." "How did you manage it?" "The water rights claim looked authentic." "Because it was authentic. My grandfather did file a claim in 1859. He just abandoned it 3 years later. But I had a forger create documentation showing continuous use. Cost me $200, but it was worth it. And the barn fire, paid a drifter to set it. He's long gone now, probably in Wyoming. No way to trace it back to me." "The cattle poisoning," Warren laughed. "That was the master stroke. I poisoned my own livestock, staged the evidence, and pinned it on your husband. Insurance will pay me $800 for those cattle. Plus, I get Cole convicted and his ranch foreclosed. 2 birds with 1 stone, as they say." "And the boot prints, how did you fake those?" "My foreman has the same boot size as Cole. Had him walk around the scene, drop the poison bottle. Sheriff found exactly what I wanted him to find." From his hiding spot above, Cole listened to every word, his fury building with each casual admission of fraud and arson and conspiracy. But he held his position, knowing that Beth's plan required patience. Beth let Warren talk, drawing out details, getting everything on record. When she was satisfied she had enough, she nodded slightly, the signal they had agreed upon. Sheriff Porter stepped out from the upstairs office. "Warren Blackwood, you're under arrest for fraud, arson, conspiracy, and perjury." Warren spun his hand, going for the gun at his hip, but froze when he saw Cole above him with a rifle aimed steady at his chest. "Don't," Cole said quietly. Thomas appeared in the doorway, cutting off escape. Henry Clark blocked the other exit. They had him trapped completely and utterly. Warren's face went through a cascade of emotions. Shock, fear, rage, and finally a desperate calculation. He lunged for Beth, trying to take her hostage, a knife appearing in his hand from some hidden sheath. Cole dropped from the loft, a 10-foot fall that he landed in a crouch, his body between Warren and Beth before the man could take 3 steps. The fight was brutal and brief. Warren was bigger, younger, but Cole fought with the fury of a man protecting everything he loved. They crashed into old mill equipment, fists flying, the knife flashing in the dusty air. Cole took a cut across his shoulder, felt the burn of it, but kept fighting. Warren got him in a headlock, the knife at his throat, and for a terrible moment it seemed Cole would die here in this abandoned mill with his wife watching. Then Beth grabbed a length of wood and brought it down on Warren's head. The man staggered, his grip loosening, and Cole wrenched free. Sheriff Porter's gun ended it, the barrel pressed to Warren's temple. "It's over, Blackwood." Warren was handcuffed and hauled to his feet, blood streaming from the cut on his head. He glared at Beth with pure hatred. "You think this changes anything? I have lawyers' money connections. I'll be out in a week." "No, you won't," Sheriff Porter said. "See, Mrs. Brennan here had the smart idea to invite the territorial marshal. He's been listening to everything from the office upstairs. You're going to territorial prison, Warren, for a very long time." The marshal, a hard-eyed man named Garrett, descended from the office with his deputies. "Warren Blackwood, you're under federal arrest for fraud and conspiracy. Judge Morrison, too, will be picking him up shortly for accepting bribes and corruption." Warren's face went white. He had played his final card and lost completely. The trial was held a week later with a territorial judge presiding. Warren Blackwood was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 15 years hard labor at the territorial prison. His properties were seized for restitution to his victims. Judge Morrison was removed from the bench and faced his own charges, and Cole's case was dismissed entirely. Not only was he cleared of the cattle poisoning charges, but the territorial judge ruled on the water rights dispute. Cole's Homestead Act claim was upheld, his water rights confirmed, and in a twist of irony, he was given first opportunity to purchase Blackwood's former ranch at auction. With money saved and careful planning, Cole bought the water rights to all of Cottonwood Creek. His ranch, which Warren had tried to steal, doubled in size overnight. The community came together for a barn, raising the new structure, rising in 3 days of coordinated effort. It was bigger than before, better built with proper ventilation and fire safety. Women brought food, children played, men worked side by side regardless of past disagreements. Salida had always been a tight-knit town, but this brought them even closer. Beth finally recovered from her frostbite, and her adventures organized the logistics with the precision of a general planning a campaign. She had found her place in this community, not as the fragile Eastern bride, but as a woman of steel and substance. And Sam, watching his father and his new mother work together to rebuild what had been destroyed, finally let go of his last resistance. One evening, as Beth was teaching him to make her mother's recipe for cookies, he looked up at her with serious eyes. "Ma," he said. The word came naturally, without hesitation. "Can you show me that step again?" Beth's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Of course, sweetheart." The ranch house in 1898 had grown quiet. The fire burned low in the hearth. Sam's infant son slept peacefully in his arms, while James had dozed off in his chair, the book sliding from his lap. Cole sat in his chair, the story complete, the journey from that desperate ride through the blizzard to this moment of peace finally told in full. "That's how we became who we are," Cole said softly. "That's how this family started, with a woman brave enough to walk into a blizzard and a man stubborn enough to ride into one to find her." Sam looked at his father with new understanding. "And Blackwood, whatever happened to him?" "Served his 15 years, Cole said. "Got out, moved to California. Heard he died there alone and broke. Some men never learn that you can't build anything lasting on lies and theft." Beth nodded, her voice gentle in the quiet room. "But we learned something different, that you can build a legacy on love and partnership and determination. Look at what we have now. This ranch, our children, our place in this community. All of it started with 47 letters and a promise kept." Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and soft, nothing like the killer storm of 2 years ago. But the sight of it made Cole think of that night of finding Beth half frozen, of the moment he knew his life had changed forever. "Every December," Beth said, as if reading his thoughts, "we should go back to that line shack. Make it a tradition. Remember where this all started." "I'd like that," Cole said. Sam stood cradling his sleeping son. "I should get this little one home. His ma will be wondering where we are." "Give her our love," Beth said. When Sam had gone, Cole and Beth sat together in the quiet house, the fire crackling, the snow falling outside. They had faced blizzards and fires, legal battles and physical confrontations, fraud and arson and threats. They had lost and rebuilt and lost again and rebuilt better. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Getting on that stage in Boston, nearly dying to get here." Beth looked at him, at the home they had made, at the sleeping child in her arms who was the proof of their love. "Not for a second. I'd do it all again. Every frozen step, every terrified moment, every challenge we faced. Because it led me here. To you. To this family. To this life." "I rode through that blizzard expecting to find a stranger," Cole said. "I found my future instead." "We found each other's future," Beth corrected. "And we built it together." They sat that way until the fire burned to embers and the snow had painted the world white again. And in the morning they would wake and work the land and raise their children and face whatever challenges came next. Together, always together, the way it had been from that first moment in the snow when two desperate people found each other and decided to build something worth keeping. The Brennan Ranch would prosper for 3 generations. Cole and Beth's children would inherit the land and the values. Their grandchildren would work the same fields, draw water from the same creek, and tell the story of how it all began. With a mail-order bride who never arrived at the station but found her cowboy anyway. With a desperate rescue in a killing blizzard. With a partnership forged in hardship and tempered by love. And every December the family would gather at that old line shack now maintained and preserved and remember. Not just the struggle, but the triumph. Not just the fear, but the courage. Not just what they survived, but what they built together from the ashes of loss and the hope of new beginnings. Some love stories start with flowers and poetry. Some start with careful courtship and gradual affection. But the best love stories, the ones that last through generations and become legend, start with 2 people willing to walk into the storm for each other, willing to fight impossible odds, willing to believe that love is not just something you fall into, but something you build day by day, choice by choice, together. That was the legacy Cole and Beth Brennan left to their children and their children's children. Not just land or cattle or wealth, but the understanding that family is worth fighting for. That promises kept matter more than comfort. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. As the snow fell soft and silent over Salida that winter night in 1885, in a warm house surrounded by family and filled with love, 2 people who had been lost and alone and desperate had found exactly what they needed. Not perfection, not ease, but partnership, purpose, home, and that Cole told his grandson years later was worth every frozen mile, every legal battle, every moment of fear and doubt. Because at the end of the story, after all the struggle and the triumph, what remained was simple and profound. Love, family, legacy. The things that mattered, the things that lasted, the things worth building a life on.